July 1816. It was supposed to be the absolute peak of summer. Across Europe and North America, families prepared for warm days, sunny fields, and the long-awaited harvest season. But as the weeks passed, something felt deeply, terrifyingly wrong. The warmth never came. But the summer simply died. Overnight, violent blizzards swept across the landscape, burying July crops under half a meter of dense, heavy snow. Farmers watched in horror as their green fields turned into frozen wastelands. In a matter of days, humanity found itself facing its worst nightmare, a sudden ice age in the middle of the year. In Europe, people woke up to a dark, blood-red sky that looked like a scene from an apocalyptic painting. In Italy, a bizarre and terrifying red snow began to fall, staining the mountains and driving villages into absolute panic. In the United States, newspapers reported historic violent blizzards in the middle of July, with temperatures plummeting below freezing in hours. The crops failed, the food simply vanished, and the global food supply chain was instantly wiped out. Mass panic set in. Doomsday cults took over the streets, screaming that the end of the world had finally arrived. Families were reduced to boiling grass and eating their own starved pets just to survive another night. But while the public prayed for mercy from the heavens, they were looking at the wrong sky. The real villain behind this global freeze wasn't a divine curse. It was a silent monster hiding right here on Earth. 15,000 kilometers away on a remote island in Indonesia, a giant was about to detonate. In April 1815, Mount Tambora exploded. It was, and still is, the largest volcanic eruption in recorded human history. The blast was so violent that the sound was heard over 2,000 kilometers away. And the mountain itself lost over 1,000 meters of its peak in seconds. But in 1815, without the internet, global news, or transoceanic telegraphs, nobody in the West heard the noise. The world remained completely oblivious as a silent, invisible threat drifted into the atmosphere. The volcano blasted millions of tons of sulfur dioxide gas straight into the stratosphere. Once there, the gas reacted with moisture, creating a massive, dense aerosol cloud of sulfate particles. This cloud slowly spread across the globe, acting as a giant, invisible mirror. It hovered over the planet, reflecting the sun's warmth back into outer space. Without the sun's energy, the delicate global climate broke down, and the impact hit the very engine of 19th century civilization. In the 19th century, horses were the absolute fuel of the world. They were the tractors that plowed the fields, the trucks that made the deliveries, and the communication network that kept cities connected. They were the backbone of global transport and trade. But horses, just like steam engines, need fuel. And their fuel was oats. With the freezing summer, oat crops across the globe simply froze in the ground, rotting before they could ever be harvested. The price of animal feed skyrocketed by over 1,000% in a few weeks. The fuel was gone. Without food, millions of horses starved to death or were reluctantly put down by their desperate owners for meat. Global transport ground to an absolute halt. Food could not be moved from ports to cities. Trade died. Major urban centers became isolated, dark, starving fortresses cut off from the rest of the world. Famine drove the population to absolute desperation. Riots broke out in major European capitals, and the social order began to collapse. But history has a strange way of turning disaster into human triumph. It was in this cold, dark isolation that human brilliance sparked in ways no one could have ever predicted. Trapped inside a dark villa in Switzerland by the endless volcanic rain and freezing storms, a young Mary Shelley found herself unable to go outside. To pass the time during that gloomy, sunless summer, she and her friends held a contest to see who could write the most terrifying story. Inspired by the bleak, apocalyptic weather outside her window, she created a masterpiece. She wrote Frankenstein. The first great science fiction horror story was literally born from the ash of an Indonesian volcano. Meanwhile, in Germany, a young inventor named Karl Dreis faced a different problem. He desperately needed to travel between towns to manage his work, but since all the horses in the region had died, he had no way to move. Refusing to be trapped by the crisis, he went to his workshop to design a mechanical alternative. He built a two-wheeled wooden frame that a person could ride by pushing their feet against the ground. The Lauf machine, the very first ancestor of the bicycle, was officially born. a volcanic crisis on the other side of the planet had forced humanity to reinvent transportation. The sun eventually returned in 1817, and the volcanic ash slowly settled back to Earth. But the warning of 1816 remained forever. Our ancestors survived the freeze using primitive tools. But if a supervolcano like Tambora erupted today, our hyper-connected, just-in-time global economy would face an unprecedented catastrophe. Our power grids would fail, our agricultural satellites would be useless, and global food shortages would begin in weeks. The climate is a fragile shield. So, the next time you ride your bike, take a moment to thank the volcano that forced us to invent it. And subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our next deep dive into history's most fascinating crises.